For those who listen often and for those listening for the first time, I'm so grateful that you're here. This is where we build mental fitness, confidence, and self-love without following someone else's blueprint. I'm Lulu, and if you're feeling stuck, anxious, struggling with your worthiness, or you're just tired of self-improvement guidance that feels like it was written for someone else, you're in the right place. This podcast is about personal growth on your terms, doing the real inner work of building self-love and self-worth from the inside out. These are honest conversations about becoming who you really are, with simple tools that guide you and meet you exactly where you are. No quick fixes, no hacks, no toxic positivity. This is unedited and always from the heart. Today is part 3 of an 8-part series inspired by patterns I kept noticing throughout 2025. I noticed them in search behavior, in workplace well-being research, in conversations, and in the kinds of questions people were asking themselves, their therapists, their coaches, and also what they were asking AI. Something shifted. People seemed to have stopped asking questions like, "What's wrong with me?" and started asking questions more like, "Why do I feel this way, even when I'm doing everything right?" So I'm here to sit with these questions alongside you, to offer my perspective, to slow down and make meaning of what we're living through together. Please share this episode with anyone who is searching, asking questions, and looking for more meaning, more purpose, more insight, more freedom and joy in their lives. A share takes a few seconds, and it can make a huge difference to someone else. And it makes a huge difference to me. Last week in part 2, we explored the gap between knowing and doing, and why you can know exactly what you need to do, and still you don't do it. We talked about how that gap between knowledge and action is not a willpower gap. It's a safety gap in your nervous system. And I offered you a tool called the next right thing, finding the smallest possible next step so that your nervous system doesn't register it as a threat. And then you take that step. So let's say you did that. You started taking action. You made the call, sent the email. You had the hard conversation. You showed up. You did the difficult thing. You did the uncomfortable thing. And you started taking those tiny steps. And still, something isn't sitting quite right because you don't feel confident. And why? Why does confidence feel so hard? Even when I know I'm capable, even when I've started taking the small steps. Let's start with something that might be familiar. I've spoken about this before. Confidence doesn't come before action, it comes after. We often think that we need to wait until we feel confident, and then once we feel confident, we take the action. But it's completely the other way around. You take the action first, even when you're scared or uncertain, and then your confidence begins to build. There's research behind this. Dr. Bandura, a psychologist who studied self-efficacy, found that the most powerful way to build confidence isn't through affirmations or pep talks. It's through what he called mastery experiences, which is simply doing the thing you're afraid of and surviving it. You take the action, you survive. That survival becomes evidence, and consistent action, consistent steps leads to consistent evidence, which builds confidence. That is why I always say, go tiny and get going. Because when you take a small action and nothing terrible happens, you're sending a message to your brain. I can do this. And that message, when you repeat it over time, turns into confidence. Okay, we've got this. So far, so good. We understand how this works and how it's supposed to work. We get some momentum going. And for a lot of us, this is when we go off the rails and things start to crumble. We take the action, we survive, we get the evidence, we start building momentum, and then we dismiss it. Yes, we flush it down the toilet by saying things like, it wasn't a big deal, anyone could have done that, I just got lucky. It doesn't really count. These tiny steps, they're so lame. There must be a better way. So we minimize our own evidence. We even dismiss it. We convince ourselves it doesn't count before it has a chance to create a meaningful difference. And because we do this, we don't allow ourselves to get the confidence boost we have earned. And instead of feeling encouraged, we feel absolutely discouraged. Instead of building momentum, we stall, or even worse, we stop. We give up too soon. And then we start to wonder why confidence still feels so far away, without realizing we've been throwing away the evidence that will build that confidence. Think about it. How many times have you done something hard and immediately downplayed it? How many times have you shown up, handled a difficult situation, made a tough decision, even when you were scared and unsure of the outcome? You did it anyway. And then you throw a hand grenade in your own life and tell yourself, it wasn't that impressive. That doesn't count. There was nothing. Too bloody small to make a difference. I'm a loser, and this tiny step BS, it sucks. It doesn't work. This is self-sabotage. It's a more quiet kind of sabotage. It's the kind where we rob ourselves of our own evidence. We rob ourselves of our own hard-earned proof that we can take those steps and survive them. And we wonder why we don't feel confident. Is this happening to you? Think about it for a moment. Have you considered that you might already have evidence you're not counting? I'm not saying you definitely do. I'm inviting you to take a look. Confidence is not only built by taking the small steps, it is also built by finally acknowledging the steps you've already taken and making them count. Because they do count. Every single one of them counts. I want to offer you something else to consider. Sometimes, even when we understand all of this, the belief that we can actually achieve what we want still feels out of reach. You hear, believe you can do it, believe you can achieve it, and something inside you resists. You feel that clench of resistance inside because you don't fully believe. Nope, you don't believe. Not yet. And you're trying to force belief and it feels hollow. Like you're lying to yourself. It feels like a big pretending act. When belief feels like too big a jump, start with trust. There's a difference. Belief says, I know I can do this. I know I'll succeed. Trust says, I don't know how this will turn out, but I trust myself to handle whatever happens. Feel the difference? Belief requires certainty about the outcome. Trust doesn't. Trust is about your relationship with yourself, knowing that no matter what happens, you won't abandon yourself. You'll figure it out. You'll adapt. You'll keep going. You'll survive, and you will handle it. What's beautiful about trust is that over time, it morphs into belief naturally, organically, quietly. There is no forcing involved. It feels real. It's the kind of belief that comes from lived experience, from showing up again and again, from keeping on, however small the steps you take are. It doesn't matter because you're moving forward. You trust, you act, you handle what happens, and then trust becomes belief. Right now, wherever you are, if believe in yourself feels like pressure and you feel resistance, just trust that you can handle what comes next. It's enough to start with trust. So here's your tiny tool for this week. I call it counting what counts. I'd like you to write down 3 things you've done in this month that required some form of courage, effort, or showing up, even when you didn't feel ready. The things you write down don't have to be dramatic. They probably won't be. Maybe it was a conversation you had, a boundary you held firm, a decision you made, something you started, something you finished, something you showed up for, even though you were uncertain and maybe even a little scared. Write those 3 things down. And if that feels like too much effort, take a few minutes to quiet your mind and think of 3 things. Bring them into focus in your mind. And then, importantly, resist the urge to minimize them. Resist the urge to dismiss them or judge them. Notice if your brain wants to say, that doesn't count, or that wasn't hard, or anyone could do that. Let those thoughts pass, but don't let them wipe out your evidence. Don't let those thoughts steal your proof. Every time you acknowledge what you've done, every time you let it count, every time you count what counts, you're making a deposit into your confidence bank. You're building the foundation for genuine belief. Here's what I'd like you to take from today. Confidence comes after action, not before it. You take the step, you survive, you build evidence. And many of us sabotage ourselves by dismissing that evidence. We minimize what we've done. And then we wonder why confidence feels so far away. Start counting what you've been discounting, what you've been dismissing, making too small. Use the tool I gave you and count what counts this week, without judgment. And if belief feels out of reach, start with trust. I don't know how this will turn out, but I trust myself to handle whatever happens. That's enough. Trust compounds into belief over time. Next week in part 4, we're exploring why we're so hard on ourselves. Because once we start building confidence, once we start letting our evidence count, many of us will meet a voice, a part of us that wants to burn it all to the ground. It sounds crazy, but it's real. So let's meet back next week to explore this together. For today, look at what you've already done. Let it be evidence. Let yourself count. You can watch this episode on my YouTube channel or check out my shorts, which are snack-sized tools to build mental fitness, one tiny step at a time. And please hit subscribe while you're there. Share this episode with people in your life who have accomplished more than they give themselves credit for. Sometimes we just need someone else to remind us that our evidence counts, that our steps count. And as always, what comes from the heart reaches the heart. And today, with deep respect for everything you've done and haven't counted, this comes straight from my heart to yours. I'll see you next week for part 4.